Hey guys, James here, and in this video I am going to be starting a series called How to Internet. In this series I'm just going to walk you guys through various web-based apps that I like, that I think will be helpful and useful for other people to know about. These are all going to be apps and things that work in your web browser that don't require you to download and install software. So I really like those kinds of apps because, first of all, the less software you can download to your computer, the better. It's just going to, every time you download and install something on your computer, it's just taking up resources. This is why Windows and Mac computers start out fast, and then they, 6 months after you buy it, they're running slow. That's a big part of why. It's because of all the things you've downloaded and installed and whatnot. So I like to download as few things as possible. Also, I actually do most of my work on a Chromebook. So I don't even have the option to download and install software, as I'm limited to things that can be done on the web in a web browser. And there's a surprising amount of things that you can do in a web browser. A lot of people don't realize this yet. Web technology has grown a lot in the past few years. I run my whole business. I'm a web developer. I run my entire business from a Chromebook, which, like I said, can't download and install apps. So I'm running my whole business from a web browser. So in this video, the first video of this series, I'm going to talk about an app that I really like. I use it a lot. It's called Gravit Designer, and it is, excuse me, it is a vector graphic program. So it's an alternative to Adobe Illustrator, or maybe you use Affinity Designer, or you're a Linux person, maybe you use Inkscape. These are all vector programs, as opposed to a raster graphic design program like Photoshop. So there are other web apps that are good alternatives to Photoshop as well, which I'll talk about in other videos. But this video is about Gravit Designer, a vector program that is an alternative to Adobe Illustrator. So to get started, you want to go ahead and go to, you can go to designer.io, also gravit.io still works. That's what the domain used to be. And it'll take you to this page, and you can go ahead and hit start now. Now you can download it if you want to. They have a version, it's the same, but you can download it to your computer if you're on a Windows computer. Or I think they have, yeah, they got a Mac version, a Linux version even, and then Chrome OS. This just opens up in the browser. And then of course they have it for PC as well. But I'm just going to click Start Now, which will open the web browser version. Now you'll have to create an account or just log in with your Gmail account. But once you do that, you'll be looking at this screen right here. This is just your, your getting started dashboard. You can see that you can start a new design, and you can just start with an empty infinite canvas if you hit create. Or they have a lot of different preset sizes you can start from. So if you know you're creating something for like your Facebook cover, there's an option for that. If you're creating a cover for a YouTube channel, there's an option for that. So lots of different options to get started. You can even put a design on a t-shirt. They have little t-shirt mock-ups for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose create here to create an infinite blank canvas. So this is my canvas here. Now if I change my mind and I decide that I do want to give my canvas some kind of width and height, I can always come over here to page, and I can change the width and height of the canvas. Let's try 1920 by 1080. And now you can see that I do in fact have a canvas here. So couple things I want to talk about first. I think I'll talk about some keyboard shortcuts that just make things go a little smoother. So if you have a mouse with a little rolly thing on it, obviously rolling up and down will move your canvas up and down, but if you hold control while you use it, it will zoom in and out. If you hold shift while you use it, it will actually scroll left to right. So the rolly thing on its own will scroll up and down like you would expect. Hold shift and you can scroll left and right. Hold control and you can zoom in and out. So I really like those keyboard shortcuts. And there are the basic ones like Control Z to undo things, Control C, Control V to paste. Let's just create a quick shape here. If I select this and I do Control C and then I do Control V, it oftentimes will just kind of paste it anywhere. In this case, it pasted it in place. But if you want to make sure that it pastes it in place, you can hold Control-Shift-V, and it'll paste it right on top of the other object. It doesn't always do that. Yeah, there you go. I just hit Control-V, and it just sort of pasted it in the middle. Maybe I copy this one. Again, Control-V. It doesn't always, you never know exactly where it's going to paste in. So if you just want to make sure that it pastes in exactly on top of the selected item, just hold Control-Shift-V and it'll paste it right there. You can see I have another layer over here. I'll do it again. I have another layer, but they're all just right on top of each other. Okay, so I like that. Some basics. A lot of these basics are just vector design program in general. Like not a lot of what I'm going to go over is specific to Gravit Designer. A lot of these vector programs have a lot of the same features. They just might be in slightly different places, and so you got to go, find out where the option you're looking for is. So we have some basic stuff up here. We can make a shape, a line, rectangle, circle, polygon, triangle, star, and these are pretty straightforward. See, I can create some stars. I can rotate stuff. We can resize stuff, of course. Now, if you just click and drag, it's going to kind of be a free transform. If you want to make sure you maintain the aspect ratio, hold Shift on your keyboard, and it will shrink and it'll maintain the aspect ratio. It doesn't always work, but if you hold Shift and Alt, it's supposed to increase and decrease while maintaining its center anchor. So that worked. So those are a couple more handy little keyboard shortcuts. This is sort of the crux. Is that the right word? I don't know. The bread and butter of a vector program is the pen tool. So with the pen tool, you can basically just kind of create whatever kind of shapes you want. If you just click and move on, it'll create a straight line. If you click but hold the click button and then kind of drag around, you can create little curvy bits there, and then you can just click on it again to get out of the curvy bit to go back to the straight lines, and then connect it up there. Another way you can make curves is after you've created a shape like this, double click on it to get so your anchors show up, and you can actually click on a line and move it around, and you can make curvy bits that way. Also, if you click on an anchor, you'll see these lines, and then you can really get in there and customize your curvy bit to get just the right kind of shape that you want. And so this is sort of, like I said, the bread and butter of vector programs. You can't really do this in like Photoshop. So some other things you can do with these anchors, you can click an anchor and come over here and you can round off that corner. You notice if you watch this corner right here, as I do this, it rounds off that corner. So that's a nice helpful little feature. When you create shapes, I'm going to delete this stuff. If I create a box, another cool thing you can do is click this circle here and drag it in, and it will round all the corners evenly. So this is nice for if you're designing like a website layout and you want to create a button with some nice rounded corners. You can do that. Then of course we have, this is a knife tool. I don't use this very often, but you can kind of come in here and slice an object in half. There we go. So now I have this object and this object. So that's kind of neat. Like I said, I don't use it very often, but there it is. Text tool, of course. Now I want to talk about text tool a little bit. So this is pretty powerful. They have lots of options over here. You can center your text horizontally. If you click out of the text and just have the text box selected, then you can also center it vertically, or you can send it to the bottom or to the top. And then you have spacing for character spacing. I'm going to increase the font size a little bit so we can see it better. Let's go even higher. You can change the character spacing. Watch as I increase this and each letter gets farther apart. You can increase the word spacing, so the words will get farther apart. And if I had more lines, you can also increase the line spacing or decrease it. So that's really nice. And then of course you have the color. You can make it red. Oops, select it. color red. And if we make it, I'm going to make it really big and bold so we can see. We can also give text a border. If I come down here and click border and do black border and increase a little bit, so you can see all of my text letters have a nice little border around them. So we'll move on. This little guy right here lets you import an image from your computer. That's pretty straightforward. Find a JPEG or a PDF even. You can plop it into your workspace. Some neat little tools. I'm going to create some boxes here. I'm just going to paste them out. Let's say I want to align all these boxes so that the top edge of the box is aligned. I could go in and try to find the little lines here and do that. But an easier way is to select each one and then come up here and click this guy right here, and that'll align them to the top. So maybe these are all different size boxes and they're all over the place, right? I will select them all and align to the top, or I can align them to the bottom, or I can align them to the right and they'll be sitting on top of each other. I can also space them evenly. So right now they're all, there's a little bit of space between here, there's a whole lot of space between here. If I select them all and choose this option, it spaces them evenly. All right. So if I want to go maybe a little bit closer together, they're all over the place. First thing I might want to do, align them all to the bottom, and then I want to space them out evenly. So those are just some nice, easy little tools there. Another thing you can do is center things. So I'm going to make this skinnier and red, let's say, and I want this to be right in the middle of this. So I could come in here and I could drag it down and let it snap to the bottom, or I could select these two. First thing I do is align them to the bottom, and then I can click this tool right here and it'll center them. Okay, now if this item was underneath, and so I couldn't see it because it was underneath this item, two things you can do. You can find the item over here and drag it to where it needs to go on top of the other layer. Okay, or I can simply select the layer that's on top and I can hit Control and the down arrow on my keyboard until it is underneath the object, so I can see this other object now. So Control up and down moves the item. I'm going to come over here and rename this item to red so you can see it. Right now it's on top. If I hit Control down, you'll notice it goes down a layer. It's now underneath this rectangle. If I hit Control down again, it's now at the very bottom. So your canvas has layers, even though you can't really see it because it's, you're looking at a two-dimensional flat screen. Your canvas does have layers, and you can control those layers manually over here by clicking, dragging, and dropping, or select the layer you want and hit Control up or down to move it wherever you want. Let's see, what else should we talk about? So there's some cool things you can do when filling shapes. So of course you can just pick a nice solid color to fill your shapes with, but you can also do gradients. So if I choose linear gradient and maybe I want it to kind of fade, I have a white background and I want to fade it from like white to this gold. I'll pick white for one of the colors and gold for the other color, and then I can click and drag these points around. So now you can see my rectangle sort of fades in from this dark orange, and it just sort of fades away into the background. Okay, you can also do radial gradients, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a circle gradient. So now I got this kind of cool sun effect going on there. Let's see here, angular gradient, which I don't really play with, but it's there. I'm actually not a graphic designer per se, so there's a lot of features that I don't get into. There's a lot more things I could be doing with Gravit that I just don't do. There's texture fill, so you can choose your own image, but they also have some of their own presets, and so you can, if you have kind of a texture image and you want to fill in an object with that texture, you can do that. We'll talk about some shadows. That is something I do use occasionally. If I click on an object, I can come down here. First of all, there's a lot of different options. Actually, we can blur blur it out. So that might be another way to get kind of a sun effect. If I take this gradient off, I'm just going to go to color fill, and I'm going to make it a circle, and then I'll give it some blur. That's another way that you could kind of get this similar effect that we had going on before. But I'm going to look at a drop shadow here. So first of all, I'm going to pick the color red just to make it obvious so we can see it really well. And the X and Y are 0, so we can't really see it. So if I want to move the shadow to the left and right, I can use the X axis. If I want to move the shadow up and down, I use the Y axis. Okay, I can blur it so it's not quite so defined of a shape. And the opacity is set to 65 by default, but you can play with that as well to get just sort of a really subtle shadow if you want to. So that's a nice feature that I use fairly often. And you can do an inner shadow, of course, same sort of principle. I'm going to make this one blue just so we can see it, maybe a purplish color. Same kind of thing. You can move it up and down, left and right, and you can change the blur so that you can get kind of a if you're really good with these shadows, you can get some really nice looking sort of three-dimensional effects with your objects. There are some clipping tools, so I'm going to create a couple boxes here, and I'm going to drag this box on top of this box. I'm going to select both boxes, and I'm going to come up here and just click stuff and see what happens. So click that. It's sort of clipped only this top part. What I use most often is subtract. So you can see it subtracted this image from that image. If we want it to go the other way around, we can come over here and reverse the order of these two images and click that. And now you'll see that it subtracted the other item from this item. So this can be really handy if you're trying to get something simple, like you just want to cut out, maybe you want to cut a circle out of this box. We'll create a circle here. I'll drop it in the middle. I'll select both these items and I'll choose subtract. And if you do that and it doesn't work right, chances are you just need to reverse the order. So if I do it this way and I hit subtract, it's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. So Control Z to undo, come over here, put the ellipse, the circle on top, and then try it again, and then it should work. Yep, there it is. So now there's a circle missing from inside of my square. Group. So if you want to group items together, let's take this circle and move it over here, and maybe we'll create a couple more things, a couple more circles, and let's say we want to group all the circles together. Right now they're each their own layer. I can select each circle, hit either Control G on my keyboard, or I can come up here and click this icon, and now they're a group over here. Now there's still individual layers inside that group, so I can still go in and modify these individual pieces, but now they're grouped together, so I can move the whole group around as one. I can change the whole group's opacity. I can just turn the visibility off for the whole group if I want to, and then I can rename this group circles. So I highly recommend naming your layers while you're building stuff. It just makes things easier later on when you're trying to edit something and you have this long list of layers over here and none of them are labeled, and it can be a pain in the butt to try to find what you're looking for. Especially if you're downloading like some other free vector program or vector image and you just want to like tweak it a little bit and it has 1,000 layers and they didn't label any of them. That's frustrating. But anyways, and then you can ungroup stuff as well by clicking this, and it'll send it back to 3 separate layers for you over there. I touched on this a little bit before already, but opacity is a fun one to mess with. One thing that I like to do a lot is, let's say you have an image, like an actual photograph. If I go to pexels.com and let's pick an image. This one looks fun. I just want to save it. I'll come back to Gravit. I'm going to click this image here to place an image. Where did they put it? Here it is. And maybe I want to put some text on top of this image, but I want the text to be white, and maybe it's just not showing up very well. Let's go font size 100, center it. Hello there. And I'll make the text white. It's just not showing up very well, right? It's hard to read. So what I'll do is I will create a rectangle that covers the entire image. Now I'm going to hit Control down to move it underneath the text, but on top of the image. I'm going to make the rectangle black, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity so the image starts to show through, but that white text is popping really nice. It's easy to read. And of course, the lower you go, the harder it is to read. The higher you go, the more the image is covered up. So you want to find that sweet spot where you can still see the image back there, but your text is nice and easy to read. So that's something I use opacity for quite a bit. You can crop images. If you double click on this image, actually I just clicked on the rectangle, right? So one thing I can do if I'm tired of clicking on the rectangle when I'm trying to click on other things, I'll click the lock, and now the rectangle is not even clickable. It's still there, I can still see it, but it's not clickable. So now if I click here, I can select the image. So if I double click on the image, I had it. Okay, it's being a little finicky for some reason here. Alright, usually if you just double click on the image you get the crop options, but we'll come over here and click the crop icon, and now we have these crop options here. So I can, if I just want this lady and I don't want all the background, I can do that and then double click when I'm done, and now you can see I've cropped out all the stuff behind that image. And then maybe now I want to resize my rectangle to match the new size of my image. There we go, and I'll move the text up. So that cropping feature is useful as well. And like I said, normally you can just double click on an image and get the crop options, but if that's not working, just come over here and click crop. Let's see here. So there's some other options. If you right click on something, you can transform, you can rotate it. You can flip it horizontally or vertically, and then arrange, bring to front, bring forward, send backwards. You can see that's the control up, control down I was talking about. And then I'm going to delete this image and unlock my rectangle. Something you can do with a rectangle, since this was a shape that we created, if I right click on it, I can convert to path. And now that gives me, if I double click on it, now I have anchor points that I can mess with, all right? And I can add more anchor points if I want to. So I couldn't do that before. You know, when you create a shape, you don't have those options. You do have this option to drag the corners in, but that's it. You don't have the option to move anchors around or add anchors or anything like that. So that's one little tip I use. I'm thinking that that's probably a good enough start for getting you kind of up and running with Gravit, or really any vector program, honestly. Like I said, everything that we've just done can be done, you know, in Illustrator or Affinity Designer. But I'm talking about this one specifically because it is a web app and it doesn't require that you download or install anything. Real quickly, I'll just go over some of your save and export options. So if you go to Export, Advanced Export, you have several options: PNG, JPEG, SVG, PDF. If you're going to be printing this like on a shirt or a coffee mug or something, you're definitely going to want to choose 300 DPI for the size. And I usually do PDF, but honestly, if you choose 300 DPI, you're probably going to be fine with a JPEG or PNG as well, printing on things. But if you save something as a PDF, you can edit it later inside another vector program. So if you download your image as a PDF, PDFs actually store the layers and whatnot, and so you can then open it up again later in Gravit again, or you could open it up in Illustrator and you could change the layers and stuff. When you save it as a JPEG or PNG, you can't do that. It's a flat image. So I before you close Gravit, even if you download, your final project, you download your PNG, your JPEG, or whatever, go ahead and do Save to Cloud. This saves your original sort of raw file with all the layers in the cloud, and then you can open that up in Gravit later to make some changes, and you still have all your layers there. As opposed to if you just download it as a JPEG and then you try to open the JPEG later, you're not going to have your layers anymore, so you won't be able to do that. And I guess before I go, the last thing I want to talk about quick is fonts. So you have all the Google fonts available. That's what Gravit uses. All the fonts from Google Fonts are here, but if you want to add a font that's not there, you can go to File, Import, Add Font, and you can find the font file like a .tff or whatever on your computer, and it'll import into here. Now the only drawback to that is when you're using the web version, they don't like stick. So if I go over here to imported fonts, you see there's none there. They don't stick. So if I refresh this page, or I close down Gravit and I come back and I open it later, I would need to re-import those fonts. That is kind of annoying. I've brought it up to them, and I think they said that it's something they're possibly working on. I don't understand. I don't feel like it should be that hard. I already have an account. I have cloud storage. It's storing all my work. I don't understand why it can't also store my fonts. But it is what it is. It is nice that I can at least import fonts, so I can use any font that I want. I'm not limited to just the Google fonts. So that is nice. Hopefully soon they'll add the ability to actually store those fonts for future use, so I don't have to import them every time I want to use them. But anyways, I hope you found this useful. If you have any other questions about Gravit Designer, please feel free to drop a question in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer it. And of course, Gravit has a community support forum, and it's actually been pretty responsive whenever I've gone there with questions. I've always been able to get my questions answered there, so definitely check that out as well. If you ask a question and I can't help you, I will probably direct you to their customer service. So thanks for watching, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in the next How to Internet video.